Good morning. Thanks. So I'm trying to get the attention of all of us, and I'm going to wish you all another good morning. So, good people, it's really wonderful to hear the chatter as well. It gives us a sense that ideas are percolating and they are being communicated, which is so important to all of us. Yeah? But if you don't mind, can I encourage you to maybe quieten down a little bit so that we can get this session going as well? Yeah? So thanks very much for coming into the venue. I again state good morning, good colleagues. Welcome to this closing plenary session of the 18th IST-Africa Conference, co-hosted by the Department of Science and Technology of the Republic of South Africa and the African Union Commission. As we draw to a close, I sincerely hope that the 25 substantive scientific sessions and the parallel activities and the networking opportunities have been utilized to their full over the last few days. I hope that these organizing tools, the spaces that they've created, have served to help us fulfill the main objectives of this series of events. As I mentioned, it is the 18th, so we've had 17 up to now. But the main objectives, just to remind you, the four main objectives of IST Africa. 1, support the development of the information society and knowledge economy on our continent, Africa. 2, promote international research, innovation, and policy cooperation and coordination. 3, showcase African research and innovation capacities. I would also include capabilities. And 4, stimulate exploitation of research results originating in both public and private sectors. So colleagues, I'm sure you agree with me, it's a very wide ambition, and hopefully the last few days, the sessions, the way in which this conference has been organized, has helped us contribute to the achievement of those. So as we convene in this closing session, I share with you a personal reflection that we remain seized with an incredible sense of awe and despair. As would have been illustrated in the technical sessions, our collective human ingenuity offers boundless possibilities of conceptualizing and concretizing solutions to the multiplicity of crises confronting us collectively as a species being, and then us as society with the variety of ways in which we've segregated ourselves. However, we also, I think, are infected by a major sense of gloom, which tends to also obscure the positive side of what's possible, as we come to realize that it is our very own socio-economic determinations that contribute very significantly to the adversities that we are confronted by. Be it the environmental trajectory that locks us in to a spectre of ecological catastrophe, or the continuance of global inequalities, or the maintenance of dominance, as opposed to embracing the huge potential of a multipolar, if not polypolar, world that we actually occupy today. As noted by the South African Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation in his remarks to the opening plenary, science knows no borders. However, it provides key platforms for initiatives and cooperation that transcend boundaries. And I really think, in terms of this spirit itself, it offers us maybe a bit more hope against the despair I've shared with you. We are 8.1 billion human beings on the planet. Notwithstanding whatever passport we may wave at each other, we are enjoined in our destiny as a species being as well. Yeah. The minister also reminded us that whilst our world systems are indeed combined, development and the benefits arising from developments to date, especially over the last 300 to 400 years, have remained unevenly distributed in world systems. As we seek a better life for all, within the geophysical boundaries of our only planetary home, I keep emphasizing this, notwithstanding our technological optimism, we are bound by this planet, not just its gravity. Yeah. We are forged out of the forces that make this planet, and therefore it is our only home that we know to date. The responsibility of rectifying the problems that we are confronted by falls to us. So we must really ensure that we enable and further expand global cooperation in the enterprise of science to enable a shared and common destiny, something we can all embrace. Yeah. You also heard the minister mention this, and I can maybe provide at an anecdotal level an even worse example than the one he mentioned. Yeah. And that is those that thought they were safe from an attack on our species by a virus. And that was the specter that we lived through of global vaccine apartheid. Yeah. You can't have some being safe where the rest are not. And I really hope when people talk post-COVID-19, it's important also as a community in science and technology. It's not a post-COVID-19 in a generic sense. It's only that the World Health Organization last month indicated that the global pandemic has ended. COVID-19 still exists, remains a threat. And we also must be wary of forthcoming threats, similarly structured, but are we more resilient today? Yeah. So enlightenment, and that's the consequence of us engaging in science and technology, has been shown over history to trump endarkenment. Those that seek to retain control through manipulation of a whole variety of tools and mechanisms that ensures the unevenness of world systems today. So let's ensure that the transformations that we seek actually break through those constraints. For us to achieve this better life, for us to achieve just a life, let me start there, not just putting a qualifier of better, we really must do much more to encourage increased investments in the very activities that enjoins all of us together in the science community, researching and seeking the truth from our research. And this is something I really think we must continue to say to each other. Yeah. For us to achieve this and ensure a shared sense of ownership, but also widening security, etc., means that we have to cooperate more. So, exemplifying the transnational nature of our polycrises, we are privileged in this closing session to be joined by four eminent, and if you'd excuse us, global panelists who will share with us their reflection on the theme of ICT collaboration as a driving force for international and regional partnerships. Our colleagues on the panel are drawn from the European Investment Bank, from Google, from our Technology Innovation Agency in South Africa, and our host, the Department of Science and Innovation as well. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the order in which our speakers will present their reflections. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to offer us their reflections in this session on the theme, as mentioned. We'll then open the floor for questions, and we'll take a wide range of questions and then allow the panelists to come back, respond to the questions, and also offer us their closing remarks as well. Yeah? So if we manage disciplinedly to go through the process in that way, we'll all get to lunch on time. Yeah? That's part of survival as well. Yeah. But I've been also told to encourage you, and I'm sure, Paul, you will recognize this, that it's not in that program that all of us have been downloading continuously. There's a small segue that you'll allow us in towards the end of the session itself, and that's where we do some of the academic honoring, and that reflects on the papers that were presented and those that have been selected for prize, as well as Paul has encouraged me to share with you, all of you that successfully submitted your evaluation forms, etc. There is a draw for a prize associated with that as well. I hope we now don't see a quick run to the door as everyone that didn't complete it on time. Yes. But that's the world of deadlines. We have a clear sense, I think, in terms of where we are going this morning in the session. Yeah? And after that prize giving, we will return to our Deputy Director General, Dan du Toit, to wrap up the session and bring this 18th IST-Africa to a close. So thanks very much for your attention. I'm going to call to the stage, to the platform now, Nadej Hopman, the Deputy Head, Regional Representative of the Southern Africa and Indian Ocean, I assume, section of the European Investment Bank in South Africa. Nadej.
That's a horribly long title. Dear moderator, fellow panelists, distinguished guests, and all protocol observed, it's quite a pleasure to actually be here. I usually present at panels related to energy, financing, and it's quite refreshing to actually be with PhDs and researchers and people who are the ones who can, I think, really change the world. And so it's really an honor to be here. I'm working with the European Investment Bank. So as its name suggests, it's very European. Actually, the member states are exclusively the EU member states. So when the UK decided to leave the EU, they actually left the shareholding of the bank. So it's extremely focused on EU priorities. We are really a policy-driven bank, and we like to call ourselves the EU Climate Bank because that's mostly what we do. We are really focused on the green transition, and it does come, as President van der Leyen said, the Green Deal only comes with green innovation and digitalization. They work hand in hand, and I'll try to explain what I'm speaking about. The other thing that the EIB does is we are probably, I think we are the only development finance institution working both inside the EU and outside of the EU. We lend more or less 80 billion euros a year, and 10% is outside of the EU. And the nice thing is that it does help. We are project-driven. We have engineers in the bank doing the due diligence and trying to improve the projects, or having that discussion with promoters to get projects in the energy space, in the innovation space, in the digitalization space, ICT mostly, to exchange and to cross-pollinize between what the bank finances inside the EU and what the bank finances outside of the EU. 20 years ago, we were one of the first banks to finance this super innovative at the time renewable energy utility scale projects. And I think that's one of the roles, because you may be wondering why you have a bank coming at such an event. I think one of the major roles of the DFIs is actually to de-risk very innovative projects. And I'll try to dwell on this later during my presentation. But yeah, 20 years ago, we were part of the very first DFIs, the development finance institutions, financing renewable energy utility scale project, concentrated solar panels, wind, onshore, offshore, large scale utility renewable energy. And we continue to do that. Out of the 80 billion I was mentioning, 80 billion euros I was mentioning earlier on, more or less 20% has been spent in 2021, and I'm pretty sure the trend is the same on the fourth revolution related projects. So, and we finance R&D, large scale R&D projects, large innovative projects. So whether it's inside or outside of the EU, it doesn't matter, as long as it's related or compatible with the Paris Agreement. We are very keen to finance large innovative projects. And I'll give you two examples maybe that are quite relevant for South Africa. The European Investment Bank has been financing, you were talking about the COVID-19, the EIB has financed BioVac, so the expansion of BioVac facilities to actually produce vaccines in South Africa for South Africans and for the region, because we do believe, as you were saying, we need to end this differentiated approach, or as you mentioned, COVID, health or COVID apartheid. And I think the sooner the vaccine production facilities are actually built and operating in the region, the better for everybody. Because this virus doesn't know any border. So I think it's a bit of a fallacy to think we can limit even by stopping planes from flying. So that's the first example. It is in South Africa, and it's ongoing. The other one is the EIB and EU pledged towards the Just Energy Transition Partnership in South Africa. The EIB has pledged €1 billion towards public sector enabling infrastructure. And because we really believe that you need, the JETP will be not only just, it will also be a transition, and transition only comes to low carbon technologies, and those are driven by innovation. So I think there's a lot of exchanges being made currently between the international partner group and South Africa to try to get the just energy transition to fly. When I speak at panels, I mentioned that. So one of the very interesting parts of the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan is related to green hydrogen and derivatives, e-methanol or ammonia, mostly including for maritime transport. But I really think innovation has a role to play in other areas. One is we need to improve energy efficiency. The best resource is the one that's not spent. It's the one that's not wasted. That's true for electricity, it's true for energy, it's true for water, it's even true for human resources. And I think ICT or innovation has a role to play in demand-side management. We could probably shave, I don't know, I think it was 2 stages of load shedding just by improving the way everybody used their electric geyser. That's maybe not a rocket science, but it could be done in quite a short term, I think. We also need to increase the green in the electricity ratio. We need, and that you can use blockchain technology. It's been used in Spain to prove that it's renewable energy generated. we should improve the electricity ratio inside the energy, and I'm thinking of electric vehicle, which is another part of the JET-P, and then come to hydrogen and PTX. And all of those domains, all of those fields require an enormous amount of innovation and communication technology. So what I would like to say is, as you were mentioning, it's a polycrisis and it's a global polycrisis. And I think the only answer has to be a global solution, and science is one of the ways to actually get there, because there's more understanding and collaboration on science levels than any other level in the world, I would say. But we can think of threats, and I think scientists are more solution-oriented. So instead of thinking of threats, we can think of opportunities. I'm thinking of precision agriculture, e-health, the dual use of land when we go green hydrogen, circular economy, energy efficiency. And on top of it, we can reap the benefits of having, engaging more SMMEs, because that's where employment comes from. It's not from big corporations, it's always SMMEs that actually drive employment, which is so much needed in South Africa. So I'm really interested in the panel, in getting your question and engaging with you on questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Nadège. Very important points that have been raised as well. And colleagues are also encouraged us paying a lot of attention to what Nadège raised about what is the role of development finance institutes and how do they actually operate within the countries that we are. Do they actually de-risk? But critically, and I'm glad that I didn't fall under the threat of shaving, but building it is very important, yeah? And the consequences of us having a productive capacity, capability, and competence is our real resilience in terms of change. So on that very positive and constructive note, we turn to Dan du Toit, Deputy Director General, International Cooperation and Resources of our Department of Science and Innovation. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much, Razigan, and hopefully I'll continue on that positive and constructive vein. Within the Department of Science and Innovation, I have the responsibility and privilege to lead a program which looks at South Africa's international partnerships in science and innovation. And we're also that part of the Department of Science and Innovation which is responsible for IST-Africa. And indeed, I think it's testimony to the importance of IST-Africa that the event has been able to be held 18 years in succession, a pandemic notwithstanding. And the Department of Science and Innovation had the privilege to, of those 18 editions, host 4 of them. The very first one in this very same building in 2006, then in 2010 in eThekwini or Durban, again in Durban in 2018, and now we are back here. So why I mention that is that this theme we are discussing in this closing session, the role of international collaboration in information and communication technology, as a driving force for regional and international partnership, has consistently, over these 18 years, been a policy priority for the Department of Science and Innovation. And that's why, when Paul Cunningham approached us, we were also willing to, and privileged, to host this first in-person edition of IST-Africa after the COVID-19 pandemic. So what I would like to do is just very briefly share with you 3 key reasons why we believe within the department that indeed ICT collaboration can be the driving force for international partnership. But before I do that, perhaps just a minor historic sort of divergence, which happens now with people of my age, Razigan. Because we were talking within the department of IST-Africa, and why is it information society technologies and not information communication technologies? And of course, there was a time when IST was very much the buzzword. Those of us, like you and me, will remember that very shortly after the World Summit on Sustainable Development, the UN had actually hosted the World Summit on the Information Society. And the focus was then very much not on the technology, but the role technology should play in society. So I'm very glad that Paul has decided to stick with the brand of information society technologies, because this is really what it should all be about. Yes, it's about the technology, but first and foremost, it's about what the impact in society is. So whether it's collaboration in IST or in ICT, that's perhaps not so important, but 3 reasons why we see this as a driving force for international collaboration in the first instance, because that's how science advances, including through ICT collaboration. Secondly, that's how we're going to respond to our key societal challenges. And thirdly, and perhaps most crucially, it makes the world a safer place. Now, I think I'm speaking to the converted audience here. You all will know that the nature of the scientific enterprise has changed, like it's perhaps always done throughout history, significantly over the past few decades. So whether it's investment in high-speed research networks, connecting researchers across the world, whether it's investment in high-performance supercomputing, grid computing facilities, management capabilities for managing large data sets, that really provides the fundamental building blocks, resources for the modern-day scientific enterprise. So irrespective of the domain, literally irrespective of the scientific discipline, science is not going to advance if we do not have ICT collaboration. One of the, I'm sure many of you will know, flagship, if not the flagship science project in South Africa is the Square Kilometre Array, which is the world's largest radio telescope we are hosting with Australia. But if you want to know what a telescope is, it's actually just an ICT facility. It's all about a supercomputer and the high-speed research networks transmitting the data. And this applies in biomedical sciences, environmental sciences, etc. So ICT collaboration, and I think over the years should pay tribute to IST-Africa, before being a very important platform to look at high-speed research networking in Africa, the work the UbuntuNet Alliance and others have done. And indeed, I think African science would not be making the increased contribution it is today to global science if it wasn't for those investments, for example, linking European and African science through the connectivity to the giant high-speed research network. So that's the first driving force for ICT collaboration, for international partnership. It's the way science progresses, and we can support international science collaboration. Just again, a funny anecdote. There was a time, probably at the first IST-Africa, before the new high-speed undersea cables came online, it was easier and faster to load your data on tapes and put it in a plane and fly them to Europe than trying to transmit them over the internet. So the world has changed, but we, as technology evolves, we need to remain vigilant so that these connectivity, ICT avails for international science collaboration, and make sure that connectivity and partnerships are truly inclusive. And then secondly, and Nadesh has spoken about it, Razigan has spoken about it, you've all spoken about it throughout the past three days. There are none of these key societal challenges, whether it's climate change, whether it's pandemic disease, whether it's food security, whether it's inequality, unemployment, which doesn't require a strong response, whether from information society technologies, information and communication technologies, digital innovation, whatever terminology we choose to employ. And let us not forget that as technology has changed, the digital divide, which we spoke about 20 years ago in multilateral forums, still very much is there. And I think it is high time that it should never have been about narrowing the divide. It should be about eliminating the divide. And I think events such as this, and which focus us on international partnerships and which make sure that access to digital resources become more inclusive, have a very important role to play. And that makes then quite simply, very easily, the transition to my third point is that ICT collaboration does make the world a safer place. And these are worrying times, as Razigan alluded. We see in different key technology domains. The world, whatever terminology you want to use, decoupling of markets. There's not the same commitment to standardization, and certainly we here in the Global South are very worried about this lack of global solidarity, the threats to multilateralism, and a technological Cold War is in no one's interest. As Razakan said, we all share this planet. If we are going to unleash and use for humanity's advancement, the potential, for example, of artificial intelligence, that needs to be underpinned by strong international collaboration. We all, and you would have discussed this in your sessions, know the concerns about the ethics, the regulatory aspects of these new technologies, which sadly has the potential, if not correctly harnessed, to further increase inequality and therefore making this world an unsafer world, which is in no one's interest. And that's why events such as this, as modest as they may be, has an important role to play, because they enable what sadly we see less of in this world, people just to speak to each other. And I think I would like to congratulate again Paul for assembling this diverse audience. So Razakan, in a nutshell, that would be my impact. It's crucial for advancing science, crucial to respond to societal challenges, and it makes this world a safer place. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Don, and also crisply summarizing at the end, so you're going to be safe for me offering my view of that. So as we prepare for our next speaker itself, I just want to remind people, within what Don has also raised, these critical issues about how we advance science and how we respond to create that safer and better world also involves resource mobilization. And this remains, not just in the title, but remains core to the worlds that we live in, because that also frames the inequities that we are inside. So remaining vigilant is important within the domains of science and technology, because we have this camaraderie as colleagues involved in the processes of science. Dan correctly points out this is not often shared outside of the envelope or the bubble that we find ourselves inside. So we know out there, often the inequalities are framed as that between the haves and the have-nots. It's a world we, and some of us, have emerged from and within. Increasingly, as we see and we quantify the realities behind the digital diffusion, we increasingly come across the no's and the no-nots. And this is something that I think has been highlighted variously across your sessions itself. And it's something, again, that we need to pay particular attention to, that we don't serve to reproduce the inequalities in terms of the work we are doing. Yeah? And on that basis, one of the key institutions in South Africa to try and redress the imbalances as well is our Technological Innovation Agency. And we have, as the chair of the board of TIA, Matsi, if I could encourage you to come up. Matsi will present as well, and we'll pick up thereafter.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I feel very short behind this tall podium, but bear with me. Good morning, everybody, to our esteemed panelists and also our guests, very smart people. I'm always very excited presenting in front of smart people. My name is Matsi Modise. I'm the chairperson of the Technology Innovation Agency, which is a Section 3A agency of the country. Very important component of the national system of innovation. TIA was established in 2009. It has the responsibility of fostering technology and innovation. What we provide as an agency is financial and non-financial support for our innovators and our technologists. We do a lot of work with institutions of higher education. We have technology transfer officers, and various other programs that do encourage technology within our education systems. TIA is very much ingrained in the National System of Innovation. Our key shareholder is the Department of Science and Innovation. We report directly to our Minister, Minister Blade Nzimande. And over the years, we've been able to support a lot of technological advancement, even ones that had solutions for COVID, which was quite a big and life-changing encounter for the globe. TIA is also very much involved in supporting government-funded intellectual property, but we also do support private intellectual property. We offer various financial, non-financial instruments in investment vehicles. It's important that we identify ourselves as de-riskers of ideas. Venture capital is very, very difficult. It's very, very limited in our country. And TIA is a government agency that bridges that gap. When you have an idea, when you're coming from a township, peri-urban areas, even the urban areas, it's very difficult to find somebody who's going to invest in your idea, somebody who's going to invest in your innovations, and somebody who's going to believe that will hold your hand from a point when you have that idea and your idea now becomes a commercial entity. So we believe that organizations such as TIA is very, very important in de-risking and investing and believing in ideas. We also support various clusters in our economy: genomics, active pharmaceutical ingredients, e-mobility. We also offer non-financial support in terms of prototype development, tech scale-up, tech validation, quality assurance. These are very key components in ensuring that as South Africa, we have many, many more entities that are going to grow and scale in our country. Many more entities that are going to come up with cutting-edge innovation. Many, many more entities that are going to represent us globally. Because we believe that South Africans, they're very smart people. They've got great ideas, but how do we support that as an agency of the state? So TIA's role is very, very important, but equally, it's important that we all play a collective role, because if we speak to today's topic, which is ICT collaborations, it's important that it has to solve for problems, which is what in essence we do at TIA. We support those that solve for global problems coming from South Africa. It has to be informative. A nation can only progress if it's an informed nation, because through information we're able to engage, we're able to come up with solutions. ICT collaboration also has to catalyze. We have to bridge the gaps between the silos that we find ourselves in. Being part of an ecosystem that's very segregated, we believe that collaborations are going to really ensure that we're able to have the desired impact. Because without talking to each other, if we as TIA are engaging ourselves in a silo, are not necessarily going into communities, communicating who we are, what we have to offer, it's important that we're able to collaborate. And also, ICT collaboration has to be an enabler and a facilitator. Markets are very important, because if we are not here to be able to create markets for especially our technologists or our entrepreneurs in the tech industry, it's very, very important that big corporations like a Google, I'm glad that they're here today, they have to form a critical part of facilitating this ecosystem. We have to cross that bridge. We have to be able to facilitate and enable that bridge. So I think ICT collaborations are very, very important. Everybody has a role. An organization like ours, as TIA, has a critical role in ensuring that we get more and more critical mass of ICT entrepreneurs and innovators that are going to come up with those solutions that the world will be proud to say, this is a South African innovation, and this is a South African innovation that has created a global solution. So being the chairperson of TIA, it is a very exciting time for us as an organization. We're looking forward to TIA 2.0. And for that to happen, collaborations are very, very important. So if today you haven't heard about our organization, the Technology Innovation Agency, I would like to be able to say to you, share the knowledge, be able to impart this knowledge around this organization that exists to empower technologists, to empower innovators, and use us. We are here. It's a government entity that's been designed to enable, to bridge that gap, and to also inspire technology and innovation. So I think I'll leave it at that note, and I look forward to more inputs and interactions with yourselves and also with my panelists. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matsi Modise. You know, as you also speak about TIA forming that bridge between research and application, I think it's also quite important to recognize that as we seek solutions, we generate a lot of information. And that information that's generated through the work that we're doing also needs to find a way back into the public domain. So it's quite important also we encourage more of the information to flow, because once we start looking for solutions, we also find others have confronted similar problems and may themselves have sought out fixes to it. But our situation in South Africa is particularly unique. And in that context, it's important at least reminding ourselves of why the urgency that Matsi is also speaking about. We have 60% youth unemployment in a generic plus 50% unemployment status of our country. This is another way of saying more than half our peoples are not involved contributing in a productive economy. And that's something that urgently needs our attention. It cannot continue. You know, it flies in the face of calling ourselves a united, non-racial, non-sexist and democratic South Africa. But we also hear the vestiges of the past continue in terms of segregations, etc. And so transformation also remains imperative. I'm saying all of these things because often when we look, how do we find out what others know in the world? We don't use the number Google, we use the services of Google. So that gives me a nice segue to actually invite to the platform Abongile Mashele, the Senior Manager for Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is it afternoon already? Good morning with 5 minutes to afternoon. Good morning, everyone. This podium was not meant for some of us who are somewhat challenged, and I'm wearing heels today, but I'm... Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. As introduced, my name is Abongile Mashele. I lead government affairs and public policy from Google in South Africa. It's actually quite exciting to be on a forum and a panel like this, especially from a government perspective, because most of the time when we get called, it's when we have to answer on regulatory issues. But I think it's an important conversation to talk about innovation and the value that it brings to society, as well as the value that we can accrue as society, particularly in our markets in Africa, in Southern Africa, with all the developmental issues. What role does tech have to play in ensuring that we enable and we accelerate our development, utilizing technological tools? So as a company like Google, obviously it makes sense because we are born out of innovation. And in an information and society gathering, which is talking about how we organize information, that's exactly how Google started. It utilized 24 years ago. They basically looked at how do we make information easily accessible? How do we use the digital technologies that we have at our disposal right now to organize information, to index it, and make it accessible at a fingerprint? And that's how Google was born. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with Google search. In South Africa, for instance, I received stats recently where we can say that in South Africa alone, we have about 7 million hits or 7 million users every day logging an inquiry on Google search looking for information. So that means South Africans are seeing the value in Google. They basically then look at how they access the information. And over the years, our product offering have evolved and they've grown. You've got your Maps solution, which is used, I'm sure most of us got here using Maps. So we've got quite a few technological solutions that we have as a company. And in South Africa, I just want to touch on this one. We actually have a presence in South Africa. We've had offices here since 2007. And we are basically looking at how do we position Google for the African market and for the South African market. Now, going to the topic and the conversation at hand on collaboration and partnership. At a global level, I think everyone is in agreement on this panel that we need to collaborate, we need to partner, because technology has changed even how we govern. So the governance tools and the instruments that we had that were very much focused on individual countries or at a sub-regional level, they have to change now, because technological solutions, the access cannot be limited to one jurisdiction or one country. So laws that are focused on one country or one jurisdiction, we have to relook. So we have to look at our multilateral institutions that are there and how do they incorporate technology, and how do we ensure that the regulatory framework that we have, ranging from speech to trade to everything else, actually cover tech and they enable innovation. So how we look at it as a company is we look at it from a global perspective, but we also understand that the state of readiness for adoption and adaptation of technological solution is not the same. The issues we have in Africa will never be the same as the issues that we have in the US. So how do we ensure that the collaboration and partnership also has a regional focus? So at Google, we have what we call a digital sprinter strategy, which basically guides how we invest and interact and engage in the different emerging markets that we operate within. And Africa is an emerging market for us. South Africa is an emerging market for us. Now, when we look at collaboration and partnership, in our digital sprinter strategy, we have 4 pillars. And I think this has been raised even when I attended the day before, that you cannot talk about transformation without access. So even though we are not an infrastructure company, we had to think about how do we enable access in Africa. You cannot talk about transformation if the people that are meant to be utilizing the technology are not ready, they are not equipped. So how do we invest in human capital to ensure that we have the required skills, but we also have consumers at the level that we need them to be able to understand the technological solutions that we have? How do we introduce new technologies to enable growth in the markets? And lastly, how do we create an enabling policy environment to allow for competition? Because I don't think anyone wants to be a dominant force. How do we enable competition? How do we have a regulatory framework or a policy framework that allows for growth, for innovation to thrive, and for small developers as well to be able to put products out in the market and be able to scale? Now, when you look at those 4 pillars, that has informed our strategy, our engagements, and our investments. In 2021, our global CEO actually announced a $1 billion investment for Africa, looking at these 4 pillars. And I think in the media you may have picked up in the last year, we had the Equiano subsea cable that landed in Melbourne Strand. That has traversed from Togo. It landed in Togo, Namibia. The last landing point was in South Africa. And the whole point of the Equiano subsea cable is to see how do we ensure that data comes through, how do we reduce the cost of data, how do we speed up internet costs, because with greater internet cost, high-speed internet cost, you can then have the new technologies coming in. You are enabled to use those new technologies. So Equiano subsea cable will revolutionize data. It's the biggest subsea cable that we've seen in the Southern African region coming in. We've partnered with OpenServe, a local telecommunications partner, to actually bring the capacity of the subsea cable into our homes through their Wi-Fi network. The second thing, when you talk about access, you also need to talk about devices, because if you have expensive devices and our consumers cannot afford them, then digital transformation will not necessarily hit the required numbers. So we also look at how do we ensure partnering with telcos, because partnership, can you see the partnership is not only with government, we're partnering with telcos. How do we ensure that original equipment manufacturers as well. How do we procure low-end smartphones so that everyone can have access to the internet utilizing their phones? Because that's where a majority of the South Africans who access the internet access it from their phones. Human capital, okay, and please tell me if I go over time. On a human capital perspective, we have quite a few programs that are there. I won't go into them. Perhaps in the question and answer session, we'll have an opportunity to talk to that. And then new technologies, I think we've recently announced for the first time that we're actually launching a cloud region in Africa. And the purpose of launching the cloud region in Africa is to see how can we assist small businesses, from small to big businesses, to utilize the benefit of cloud for the data, for the efficiencies that they can draw. And then the last thing on the policy framework, I really won't belabor that, but I think we cannot emphasize that an enabling policy framework is important. A harmonized policy framework is important, especially for Africa. And because laws and policies are informed by the values of the people. So how can we develop a harmonized regulatory framework in all the various aspects of regulation and policy for Africa? And then the last thing, investment in research. In 2021, we also launched an AI Institute in Ghana. And the sole purpose of the AI Institute is how do we localize our technological solutions for Africans? Because if the technology cannot speak isiXhosa, which is my mother tongue, then it also impacts scalability of the technology. So how do we utilize machine learning to make sure that our products are able to understand the African nuances and the African solutions? So to go back to the question, collaboration is definitely important. Collaboration has to be tailored to the market that you are looking at. And I think all players in the ecosystem need to play their role to make sure that we can fully realize the value that innovation provides for us, especially ICT technology. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Abangile. You know, as I hear you speak as well, you know, it's quite important also us recognizing that in some instances we are also coming full circle. You know, it's not just the points that Dan raised about some of our ages, but we've also been able to see through processes over time, and we've been learning through this. And it's quite important that the lessons Africa has generated from our intention of developing also is not lost. So I encourage Google as well, not just in terms of current markets, also help us with the digitization of our archives, which remain difficult to access in many instances. Yeah, you know, it's also, I think, quite telling that it's mentioned by a larger firm as Google within its own ecosystem that Africa is recognized as an emerging market. I mean, if we all did the Google search, we'll all find out, all of us, 8.1 billion, owe our origins to this continent itself. Yeah, so just think about it. All of us are now redefining our original home as an emerging market. Yeah, we should be congratulated on that. The other point that's also quite important here, you know, we often hear about this in terms of the readiness and our capacity to join in. As I think has been demonstrated over the last few days, people are finding solutions, workarounds to the real challenges that confront us. And that's why it's always quite important, not just to commoditize people, but to enhance capacity building, to widen and link capability formation. Because often the readiness is not premised on you can't do it, it's you can't afford to do it. And we've got to tackle this issue of costing, price gouging, and a whole range of other behaviors that do predominate. The point about competition is so much more important because of that. You know, the minister also reminded us that we have a lot of data redundancy because of the square kilometer array and the bigger investments that science and technology is actually making. And this, he challenged us. How do we make use of this data that's available? Well, what quite key. Yeah, what's quite key in this? What's quite key in this, for us to have that enabling sense, to have the harmonization that flows, is to ensure that those that are concerned are involved in determining the regulations. Yeah? It cannot be just top-down and expecting behavioral change. And that's why it also becomes important who writes the legislature, who writes these instruments that then govern us. And here we have some challenges as well. And the use of ICT, the enabling environments that generated from us, I think also helps us through our own knowledge portals to share experiences in science and technology policy formulation across the continent. And that offers us huge benefits as well. For us to have indigenous or endogenous development based on the continent, we have to not only grasp the technologies, we have to get inside it. It cannot be a black box. Yeah? And to that end, it also means empowering ourselves. We now shift into questions and answers to our colleagues that have tried valiantly to respond to the challenges of collaboration and cooperation. As I've been reminded by our good colleague Paul, yeah, that you'll see there are mics on your tables and encouraging this notion of shared. All of us don't need an individual device. So you'll find one between you guys as you are set there. Please press the button once you're indicated to speak, and we'll pick that up. Please also provide us, because this is being recorded, with your name, organization, and country. That will help us also appreciate your question even more. Yeah. So on that note, I turn to yourselves and ask, I'm sure you've got many questions after these last few days, and especially this panel. So please, an indication. And we're going to take all of the questions as a batch. Yeah. If you want to direct it, please direct it. But we then will afford all the panelists the chance to respond as well. And as I mentioned, give us their closing remarks before Professor Cunningham offers the awards. Yeah. So, ma'am, I recognize you. 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry I'm calling you by numbers. I'm not commodifying you. Number 4, upper top. Number 5, number 6. Are we good? We have 6 people that have indicated. So please, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. My name is Chipo Kanjo, working with Invest of Malawi, and I come from Malawi. Mm-hmm. There was mention of the need to have enabling framework for the innovators, and I would just like to learn from South Africa what policies and strategies are available, are in place to promote things like startups and innovators.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chipo. Number 2.
Number 2 is there.
Sorry, right here. 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Paula Musuva. I'm an assistant professor at United States International University, based in Nairobi. Mm-hmm. And I'm just intrigued by the discussion and just listening in from a perspective of we've been a lot, in many cases, been consumers. Our role has been more in terms of access and importing and using and relying on things that have been manufactured or developed elsewhere. Even from the discussion that we've had, even from listening to the presentation from Google. And I think for me, it's just just from the panelists, what are the lessons we can learn in terms of just growing our capabilities and moving them from just an ideological level to actualization, and what could be the things that we need to really focus on, even as innovators, to move our great ideas into actual potential that can, make a difference. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mm-hmm. So it was my pleasure. I'm Alfredo Ronchi from Italy, Politecnico di Milano Technical University. I'm professor in engineering there. So we heard about innovation, readiness skills. employment, society, and culture these days. I just would like to recap very quickly a specific evolution that started in 1995 with the super information highways Al Gore. Immediately after, we had the European Commission idea, the Bangeran report about the information society, the accent on society, not only on technology. And then we had in 2002, the announcement in 2003, the World Summit on Information Society, Genève, with a strong impact on the civil society, but was for the first time probably involved directly in the, not creation, but in some way shaping of the information society. 2005, again, Tunis, this time there was the creation of, let's say, the reply to the question who is going to rule the internet, and so the creation of the IGF, again with this concept of multi-stakeholder involvement. But then, nowadays, we have 2022-23, the Global Digital Compact. But it seems to me that the relevance of society or the impact on society is lowering time by time. And so nowadays is mainly technology trained and addressed much more to the fintech and to the global economy than as a kind of tool to enhance and empower society. We are time by time giving much more of our freedom to technology, and nowadays with the metaverse announcement, we are blurring the borders in between meta life and real life, and that's, I think, is a little bit critical, as well as the funnel converging toward a unique culture, a new unique way to see culture losing our specificity, both in Africa or in Far Eastern countries and some part of our history. So what do you think about this? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alfredo. Colleague, please.
Good day, colleagues. My name is Bloodless from Durban University of Technology. It's good to be here. So I don't know if anyone else felt what I felt when I saw the lady, Abongile, saying Google South Africa. I thought Google actually is not a person. There's nothing, nothing can be touched. But really, there's a human body behind this. And actually, it felt warm. Say, okay, with those things, there's a human body behind these things, which is a good thing, by the way, because then we're not talking to machines, to algorithms and all that. When you actually put in, like, maybe instructions, there are actually people there who can actually see what we're doing, which is a good thing. And then to now say, do we look at the technologies that are actually flooding the environment, and then we say, how do they integrate with the Google app? And it's like its suite of packages, or I don't know what you want to call it. Is it a package of suits or suits of packages? Because what I know is there's some technologies that don't talk to Google or its sister technologies. I'm not going to talk about a name, because then it might be conflict of interest or something like that. But there are phones where you know you're buying it because of its price, but you're going to pay a bigger price where now you cannot integrate into other software. I had the misfortune of getting one phone because my phone was stolen. Within the half, I'm from an institution where I need to have a phone every minute. I had to rush to a store to get a very cheap phone, but at the end of it, it couldn't integrate. And yeah, I had just to say bye-bye and get to a more expensive phone. Do we look at those things? Because then we're seeing actually being sort of sensitive and being inclusive. Because if we get cheap ones which do not integrate, then we're actually sort of leaving quite a big bunch of the South African environment behind. Because I can't even afford an iPhone. I can't even afford quite a lot of these expensive Android-based phones. Then from there, I'm going to go to Nadej. Thank you. I wasn't very sure whether they had this one or that one. I was very taken aback when we talked about planes being like grounded. Remember during COVID, at one time, government said, let's just not fly. But I think it was good to do that. And I'm going to explain why. In like 1 minute, humans, we walk a lot. We just move a lot. We need to just stand still. Sometimes we just need to stop and stand still. And that's what the grounding of planes did. Because the environment was just fed up. So we're repopulating with the virus. We're the machines, we know this part. Microbiologically, that virus needs a human body to grow. And you just had to sit still. And then with time, with vaccinations coming in, the environment was also managing and breaking down the particles. And when we went back, the environment could manage this. So definitely the planes work, stopping them, making the human beings to stop just walking, stand still, stay at home. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks so much from our colleague from Durban University of Technology. Yeah. I'm going to tease you as well. Yeah. You know, very much we have to watch thanking the firm itself. We may have to thank a volcano, yeah, in Iceland, yeah, for showing us what happens when nature. But it reminds us also, colleagues, of the gap between ourselves and nature as we are moving ahead. Yeah? And that's called a metabolic rift. And very few have paid attention to how we redress that gap between ourselves and the nature that we are part of. But we have 3 more colleagues, so please.
Thank you very much to the panelists. It's PK Mutsapong from the CSR. My first question goes to Ms. Hopman. We do welcome the 8.5 commitment in the energy transition, but my question is, are you also having discussions with OMEs in terms of the cost of us implementing the green energy type of electrification in South Africa? Because it's great, 8.5 it's great, but in terms of ordinary South African procuring the material to put, solar panels to put on their roofs, that could be quite expensive. So that wouldn't really go very far. And I've read that making our electricity green for the world, it will cost us 62 trillion rands, and I'm looking at Africa to say whether that portion that will go to Africa, whether Africa will be able to afford that. So in your discussion, I'm just asking if you are considering those. My second question goes to Matsi. Congratulations on being appointed as the new tier chair. I heard you mention that it's tier 2.0 now. Does the 2.0 come with new funding instruments that will address the gap in early stage financing? That's my question. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, PK. As we move to our colleague next to you.
Thank you, Chair. Chuma Memela here from the University of Fort Hare. My question is directed at Mrs. Hopman. Sorry to put you on the spot. I think there was a bit of mental telepathy between my colleague over here, because my question is also regarding the just energy transition. So I think as academics and scientists, innovators, we can be sometimes so far removed from reality. And I don't want to be misunderstood as someone who's arguing for technological redress. But my concern around the just energy transition is that there are towns in South Africa that are solely dependent on the mining of coal. And of course, there's a large value chain that comes with that. So I'm wondering if, as leaders and people in this space, are we cognizant of the socio-economic things that come along with that? How are we going to absorb these people that don't have the qualifications that we possess, but live off their bare hands? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was one more question. Look around, please.
Thank you. My name is Mohinyawa Degwa from Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, Kenya. My question regards the honesty of Africa. Since we're talking about IST-Africa, we've constantly mentioned that data is the new fossil fuel of the 21st century. But I'm not sure how prepared we as Africans on this subject, how prepared we are. For instance, maybe I can be advised. How many data centers do we have in Africa? How do we let others handle this data for us, knowing how critical this data is, and what are we doing? What are the authorities doing about it? And, okay, God forbid, suppose one day we wake up and these data centers out there storing data for us are shut down maybe, or there are some authority issues. What will we do? Will we go back to zero? And yeah, what are the authorities doing about it? Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. You know, colleagues, I'm just having a quick scan around. Please.
Hello, my name is Tandile Notodile. I'm from the University of the Western Cape. I'm currently doing masters in computer sciences, specializing with research point of interest in machine learning and blockchain. Now, just a brief, I'm actually an entrepreneur while I'm also a young researcher. So I have this platform that I call Audible, that is a job skills matching platform for job seekers and job creators in South Africa. Now, my question is tailored to the TIA organization, to Nazi, and also to Google. What is the path that someone like me can take in order to get support and also capital resources while tackling these social issues, specifically unemployment?
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Tandile. You know, if colleagues don't mind, part of being innovative is also us disrupting things, yeah? So if you don't mind, I think it will make sense if we reverse the order in terms of the colleagues responding as well. You know, the last question was directed at Google, our colleague from Google. So as you prepare to come up, I just want to make 2 or 3 points, so you can take your time and getting up here. You know, the colleague has raised a very important point about the things that bind us in, especially when it comes to resources. And that's why I made the point earlier about Africa only being seen now as an emerging economy, as opposed to us being the source of all humanity. Yeah? In this gap, we must also be careful in terms of the things we wish upon ourselves. Yeah? And to that extent, we have to be wary about the gifts and ask the question, are these gifts for us? Who makes it and why is it here? So part and parcel of that, and this is why we need honesty amongst ourselves as well, in a very serious way. Look at the number you mentioned. It's in the trillions. What was South Africa's total gross domestic product in 2022? Measured in rands. Come on, all of us are talking about the economy. 4.6 trillion. 4.6 trillion. Yeah. So we have to have a sense of scale. We have to have a sense of our underdevelopment captured inside those numbers. Yeah? And because of that, it actually shapes and informs how we understand what is available to us that we can utilize to bring about change. Yeah? So in this as well, it's really important that the transnational corporations have a link with us, but we recognize them as transnational corporations. We also look at the cooperation that's being mentioned between transnational and regional and national as well. And these could also be at the level of enterprises. Yeah? So there's much more that could be done. I was going to premise this on just reminding people, you know, that company is very famous. You know? But it was formed in a mistake. And that mistake was people couldn't spell Gongo. Yeah, which is 1 followed by 100 zeros. Yeah? So this thing of big numbers and things like this are important. We must understand it. If we don't understand it, we get locked in these policies that then are not for our benefit because we didn't understand, we didn't count what its implications are. So I hope that gives you a sufficient extra preparatory time as you come. Abongile, thanks so much. Yeah.
I don't think we had a lot of questions here. I think a lot of the questions were for everyone. I'll start with the Google-specific questions. There's many of us with legs and arms and everything there, about 190,000 of us globally. In South Africa, I think we have a staff complement not more than 80 of engineers, salespeople, people like me, marketers. So there's quite a few. We've got an office in Kenya. We've got an office in Nigeria as well. So we've got a regional presence. Now, on the question that you asked on integration, I think our phones, or our platform is Android. We actually don't manufacture phones, but our platform is Android. And it's one of the leading phone operating systems that we actually have in Africa. It's one of the cheapest ones as well. So I'd be amazed to hear which one was the cheaper one that you got. But I think what I spoke to earlier is about how do we get the costs of Android operating phones down in Africa so that we can have more access. Because the issue of Android is open source, so it's really open to anyone for them to utilize our platform to code, to create their apps. The issue of interoperability of operating systems is a bit tricky. It's like asking for interoperability between a Merc and a BMW. So we have to look at basically we have to look at it in that way. But from our side, as Google, I acknowledge your point in terms of the cost, so that you can have more people accessing devices in South African rands, for instance, a smartphone at 500 rand, 400 rands, so that more people can access it. The question that my homeboy from Cape Town asked about, well, I assume you're from Cape Town, UWC, about pathways. I wouldn't say there is a particular pathway. I'm not a developer. I studied the law regulatory side of things. But from what I've seen in the sector is there's no defined pathway. But what I can say is something that tech companies are realizing is what support can we give to tech startups in the market so that they can grow and they can scale, and not only for South Africa, but for other markets as well. And those include, we have accelerator programs. We have, I know that at UWC, for instance, we have a developer club. I'm not sure if you are aware of it. We have a developer club that is actually supported by our developer team. They get mentorship from engineers at Google. We've got accelerator programs that we have. So I can definitely share that through the organizers so that they can share it with everyone here, because this is all information that's publicly available. We have accelerator programs. We have what we call a Black Founders Fund, which is non-dilutive funding that is provided to Black-owned tech startups. So we've got quite a bit of offerings to support, because we understand that the journey of a startup is not easy. It's not easy to get funding. It's not easy to access markets. It's about discoverability on the app stores. How do you make sure that when I go to the app store, I can pick up your app because I didn't know about it? So we have programs that actually help you to leverage your application on our app store. There was a question on policies available to promote startups. I think Motse sitting next to me actually will talk some more about what we have in South Africa, but I whispered to her, I'm not representing government, but I whispered that from our perspective as Google, we have been championing for a startup bill at an AU level. How do we develop a startup bill for Africa to look at the bottlenecks that may be there, not only from infrastructure, but access to funding, the bureaucracies, because the taxation, all those things. And it's a universal thing for small businesses across, but maybe there are unique intricacies for tech startups. So we've got that. I think, how do we grow capabilities and look to our own ideas? I think that's the whole point of this conference, actually. How do we look at creating and developing our own technological solutions? I always say it's always great to talk about wanting a Google in Africa that comes from Africa, but will that be creating additional value for Africa? But what we should be asking ourselves is, what does Africa need? and how can we develop technological solutions that will suit Africa that we can scale globally, rather than how can we try and recreate what is already existing, because in my view, that's not innovation, that's replicating what's already there. So how can we develop what is required in Africa? I know a few years ago when Eskom's the app was launched, everyone used to laugh about it, but now it's part of our daily lives. I wake up and I look at that app to plan my day, and it's a uniquely South African thing. And I think there was a question on the security data. You asked about data, the new politics of data. My pearls of wisdom on that topic, I think governments all over are trying to do something, and it's all worthwhile that governments are trying to do something. But I would propose that we look at it not from a localization perspective, which is what we're seeing a lot more, but also from a security perspective, emphasizing the security perspective. How do we secure our data so that even if it finds itself in another jurisdiction, it will not be given to another power that it's not supposed to have? So how do we ensure that we secure our data, especially private personal data? And I think South Africa has been leading in that regard, and hopefully other African countries can also emulate that. I think I've covered everything. Thank you.
As we say thank you to Abangile as well, it's also quite important, Abangile, if you don't mind, because we have definitions for even the thing called innovation. Why? Because we have to measure it. Yeah. So there is a gap, small gap, between what's new to the world versus what's new to us. And part of redressing the inequalities that exist is that we don't have such a gap. That if it is new to the world, it's new to all of us, and we can all access it. That's not how world systems operate at present, unfortunately. But it gives us a sense that a better world is possible if we can transcend such things. So, Matsi Madesa, we have quite a few questions regarding how we help in South Africa. Please. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I noted 3 questions that I could happily give my inputs on. I think I'll start with the last one regarding path to success. I'm happy that you're also on the other side, which is an entrepreneur. We need more of you. We need to support you. We need to grow employment in our country, and also we need to grow the economy. So path to success, I think, given what you do, it's important to have a sense of fit for market. So does the market actually want what you're providing? Because a lot of entrepreneurs get excited with ideas, but they are not fit for market. So you have to go out there and do your own market validation. Ask people, are they willing to pay for what you're offering? Is it something that's solving a problem that they have? And how much is it that they're able or wanting or keen to pay for it? I think we struggle a lot with market validation and having fit for market solutions. And I think take advantage, which my colleague did speak to, we have quite a robust ecosystem in South Africa of support. We have a number of incubators, a number of accelerators, early stage funding, which I'll speak to what TIA is doing. It's a bit of a gap. I think the government, especially TIA, is playing a bigger role in that regard. But once you've been able to have proof of concept, your product is out there, there are a lot of players in the venture capital market or the VC industry. And our industry is also maturing. Well, not maturing, but it's growing. It's bigger than what it used to be. So take advantage of all of those incubators and accelerators. Various industries have various programs. Corporates are coming to the table with corporate venturing, where they actually incubate and invest in your product. So if you're an entrepreneur in South Africa, you really, really must take advantage. We don't know for how long we're going to have such support. There's also what you call enterprise development. Most, if not all, big corporations that are listed on the JSE Stock Exchange have to spend a certain percentage towards supply and enterprise development. So look at what industry are you in, look at the big companies that are playing in that space, and also look at what is their turnover, because then it will be able to indicate how much they're spending on developing small enterprises within their value chain. So we're very, very fortunate in South Africa, but I think we do miss it by not necessarily going out there and seeking for those opportunities. So I think your path to success is quite easier than other countries on the continent because the support is there. But also our challenges with all the support that our ecosystem has been providing. Why are we not having entrepreneurs that are really growing businesses that are fit for market and are growing our economies and contributing towards job creation? So there's a big gap there. So that's my answer to that question. And then TIA 2.0, something that we're very excited about. And I think TIA does have funding instruments that exist. I'll talk to what they are, but our primary goal is how do we provide awareness that they exist? How do we provide awareness that we exist as an organization that does, which plays a big role in de-risking, so that by the time you've gone through our support, financial and non-financial support, it's easy for you to go to venture capitalists because now we've de-risked your enterprise or your idea or your innovation. So awareness, access. So how do we make sure that we are engaging with our partners, with our stakeholders, with our universities, with the corporate industry, saying that this is who TIA is and this is what TIA provides, so that people are aware of what we're doing. And then the scale. Obviously, we would require more money. So I'm speaking here to our very key stakeholder, Mr. Danya, that TIA could do with more money, but we do have an innovation fund. That's an instrument that's been created by the DSI that is going to ensure that an organization like a TIA would have more money to play in the de-risking space. But then also, as an organization, we do depend primarily on the government because we are a government entity. But now we're saying, as an organization, how do we externalize ourselves? How do we leverage the funding that exists? How do we engage the private sector and also the public sector? Because there's a lot of innovation that has to happen within government, right? And TIA is responsible for that. So how do we go out to the public and the private sector and leverage the funding that does exist? Because we do have instruments, we do have beneficiaries, and how do we actually now deploy that kind of funding and also collect it? We have to go outside of what the government provides for us. We have to be innovative ourselves as well, so that there's more that we can offer. And then also efficiency of deploying our funds. It's been a bit of a challenge within the organization. Turnaround times, people would submit their applications. People might not even know about, call for applications. So how do we ensure that there's efficiency in what we're doing and how we're doing it? We're very big on that. I think within the year that I've been in the organization, in every board meeting we discuss turnaround time. And our executive team always has to talk to what have we done to improve the number of time we take to actually approve a lot of the funding requirements. So turnaround time efficiency is very important. And then monitoring and evaluation, very, very key for us to, once we have now deployed our funding, we're able to monitor and evaluate and to ensure that we provide after funding support, because we can't just give you money and let you run off. We have to continue to hold your hand. So we've embarked on a very exciting journey. We've also ensured that as an organization, we are going to engage more with the venture capital industry. So as a limited partner, and then also as co-investing. So we've actually engaged quite robustly with the venture capital industry around co-investments. We've also partnered with the SA SMME Fund, which is, the biggest private sector venture fund in South Africa. And also we did what we call the Industry Matching Fund. We've piloted it since 2020. And in essence, the Industry Matching Fund is how does TIA become a limited partner in some of the funds that exist. So we're quite robust. We want to make the circle bigger. We want to engage the public and the private sector and also go beyond South Africa because, the innovations that are coming, the technologies that are coming are fit for a global market. So how do we engage global investors as well? We are embarking on a benchmarking exercise. So last week, we went to Russia. So it's a very interesting trip, I must be honest, and I won't go into the politics of that. However, we were invited by a TIA-like organization, and we were able to see how a country like Russia has been able to enable technology for various sectors. And wow, it's mind-blowing. We see that the world, it's a bigger world out there, and I think jealously we're like, our innovators in South Africa deserve this. So we're also going to go to Singapore, we're going to Malaysia, we're going to Ireland, progressive countries. And I mean, we have good relationships with African countries, so we've done a lot of work in Kenya. Don't think Malawi per se, but we are open to invitations. Namibia, Botswana, so we do a lot of interactions with our African counterparts, but I think also going outside and going to countries like Singapore, which is very strong in financial technology. We can learn a lot, but we can also teach a lot. We never go there as we have nothing to offer, we're here to learn. It's like, actually, South Africa has a lot to offer as well, and this is what we can do for you. We always take that stance. So quite excited, and I think access and awareness is very important because we do have funding instruments to de-risk ventures. And then the last question is around policy. And I'd speak to our colleague that is from Malawi. So I must be honest, we have huge policy gaps in our country. I'm not going to say we are the most progressive, and that's just my nature. I'm an honest person. But we do have interventions. If you're aware of the Startup Acts, the Startup Bills, Nigeria passed a Startup Bill last year. Tunisia was the first one on the continent to have a Startup Act. And so South Africa also have a Startup Act, and I'm quite, I'm the chairperson of the South African Startup Act movement. And what we've done is we have gotten the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurs, whether incubators, accelerators, funders, whatever role you play in capacitating on high impact, high growth startups. We've come together as an industry, and we call ourselves a movement. And we've been able to identify challenges and gaps, right? So firstly being incentives for more early stage funding. South Africa used to have Section 12J, which last year, I think 2021, the government took it away because it was abused. But this, in essence, was a tax incentive to provide for venture capital companies that are investing in early stage ventures. But I think the abuse came when that particular incentive was not used for investing in startups. It was used for everything else, so people were able to find gaps. And I understand why the government would actually want to remove it, but we believe that instead of removing it, because we do need this incentive, rather refine it, rather punish those who have been abusing it. And it's because at the end of the day, we still do need a tax incentive for people who are investing in technology startups. So, and then also we have a business visa in South Africa, which the government is working very hard on. And the president on various occasions, also in his State of the Nation address, spoke to having a startup visa or remote working visa. So meaning that our fellow Africans wanting to come into South Africa, or anybody wanting to come into South Africa to engage, to start a company, sharing of skills, information opportunities, investing in South Africa, we shouldn't make it difficult for you to come into the country. So that's why it's important that we have something like a startup visa. So government is working on that. And then another policy gap, which is also a policy opportunity, is around exchange control. So South Africa has what you call exchange control, that if you are trying to exchange your IP or transfer your IP, let's say you are a South African startup and you are having to have an investor in America, it's very difficult for them to have access to IP. They have to go through exchange control. It's a lengthy process. It's an expensive process. It includes a lot of lawyers. So it's important that we don't remove it. I doubt we'll ever win that battle, but we refine it and make it easy. So as a Startup Act movement or the community, we said, government, here are recommendations around making it easy to start and grow your business in South Africa. And the good thing is we've been doing this for many, many years. I think for as long as I've been in this space, it's now, I think 2014, we had a white paper, clear recommendation to the government. Now, next year it will be 10 years. What's key is that the government has now come to the party. So the Department of Science and Innovation has come to the party. We are engaging with the National Youth Development Agency, and we are all lobbying towards a progressive policy. So as much as, I'd love to say we have all these great grand policies, we've got gaps, but we are currently working on them, and government has come, and also the president has acknowledged that there's a startup ecosystem that must be supported. So I think, I'll end it at that and give my colleagues an opportunity to answer other questions.
Thanks so much, Matsi. The points that you raise around de-risking and as we are learning in practice really needs much more emphasis. And it really is these lessons itself also that are deserving of being shared. So it's quite critical. We'll never have any perfect, fully formed policy framework. So it's not that we have to be aware of those gaps. These gaps will continue to emerge, and we need a body politic that's capable of absorbing the changes. And that's what transformation would be about, shifting us towards these new objectives and orienting. While we do that, colleagues, there's also grounded issues that we carry going forward. Yeah? So within that as well, the gap between the public investments in the types of infrastructures required for us to have everything that's been mentioned as positive and thriving also demands some attention. Yeah? And so within that sort of hint as well, we invite Nadesh to the platform. Thank you.
So I'm fully cognizant of the fact that Dan and I stand squarely between you and lunch. So I'll try to be brief. I want to answer the questions around the just energy transition and the coal miners, the coal sector. I fully agree with the plane. It's also nice to stand still for some moments. I see accelerators, hydrogen accelerators, and all sorts of things to accelerate the time. I think we also sometimes need to stand still. So I totally agree. I want there was a question about the OEM costs of PV. So out of the $8.5 billion, €1 billion was pledged by the EIB for public sector. So enabling infrastructure, sovereign, sub-sovereign, sovereign guaranteed public sector, enabling infrastructure. Because as we all recognize in South Africa, we need more public sector infrastructure investment badly. And I think that's where we have a competitive advantage. So it's less of the private sector for that billion than it is for the public sector enabling infrastructure. Now, you were mentioning the cost of PV or the cost of going green. I would like to challenge that and say, what's the opportunity costs? What's the plan B? If you're not investing in renewable, what are you investing in? And is that more cost effective on a life cycle basis? So I would challenge you to find a technology today that can be built at the speed you can build renewable energy, so having electrons today in the grid, and with a life cycle cost that is more efficient than renewable energy, and even renewable energy plus battery for that matter, or dispatchable renewable energy like CSP, concentrated solar panels, so solar power. So that's one thing. So building it, because I understand the nuclear energy is probably on a life cycle basis cheaper on the kilowatt hour, but you won't get your electrons today, neither tomorrow actually for that matter. So you need to have a mix, and that's exactly what the integrated resource planning is all about, is not basing your whole economy on one single technology, and that's vital, that's very critical. But PV, if you want renewable energy, is probably the fastest to be built in stages compared to having even new coal-fired power plants. How long did Kuzile and Medupi take to actually work some days? So that's only taking the life cycle on a pure economic or financial basis. Now, if you also take the externalities of polluting, of the amount of water that you need for coal-powered power plants or for nuclear, the pollution on the water, the pollution related to mines, the health problems for coal miners and all the families. If you look at Mpumalanga, the amount of people with asthma is just staggering. So if you only could look at a cost basis, you're already most probably, and you want your electrons now, you're probably going to go renewable energy. Now, if you also add the externalities, you're definitely not going to call on the purely financial. If you take the public health sector, I'm not talking about the humans that, and I'll come to that. And you were talking about the costs of PV, and if you look at the private sector today in South Africa, they are going full on PV. So the problem is less the demand than it is the supply. If you look at the shortages, it's shortages of solar panels, of inverters, of batteries, rather than shortages of people who can supply. So it seems that the price is quite affordable, or is acceptable to the private sector. And I think if you look at the leverage that the private sector can actually bring to a country like South Africa, you see the enthusiasm of the private sector to go, and the number of jobs it has created for small installers of PV panels on households, for installers of batteries on inverters. It's quite impressive in the short amount of time that South Africa was able to respond and train people and get skills in place to actually cater for this totally new market. So I think if you look at the employment, you have in South Africa created an enormous amount of new jobs in the renewable energy space. So to come to employment and humans, I think if you look at, it depends on the scope you're taking. It depends on, so it depends how you frame the problem, right? You can frame it on a whole South African economy scale, or you can frame it on the coal miner scale. So if you look at a South African economy scale, that's exactly what the RIP is actually meant to do, is to look at a global optimum, so the best solution on the countrywide scale. And what is mentioned is the amount of renewable energy that is actually now in the RIP is quite impressive. So if you look at the coal miners, there's some very good examples in Australia and in Spain, in Bilbao, in Australia. They reskilled the coal miners to actually be solar. So you say they do it by bare hands. I tend to disagree. It's super mechanical. There's a lot of skills in Mpumalanga and in the coal mining regions. And I think to reskill people to do something that is not detrimental to their health, like installing PV panels or building solar panels, building wind towers or wind blades, is far more interesting. It's probably also better for their health as coal miners, and it will also contribute to a better society as a whole for South Africa. So you're creating more jobs of better quality. You can reskill the people. They are not mining coal with their bare hands. They have skills. And I think if you look at the jobs created with renewable energy on the kilowatt basis, you will see that there's actually more on the renewable energy. And in Spain, there was this town, I don't know if you'll have a chance to go and visit, but Bilbao used to be a coal mining town. It's now the most beautiful town, all based on cultural and innovation. There's the Guggenheim Museum there. They've completely turned around the economy to look at more actually IT and cultural basis than working on coal. There's a quite interesting example in the south of France where they have reused a coal mine to use the shafts and the water that's always at the same temperature to use as a heat pump. So they have put a whole industrial and a service industrial zone there, and they heat or they cool down depending on the time of the year, using a heat pump, using the 23-degree at the bottom of the mine. So they have a 23-degree constant for the whole year round. So there's a way, if you think about it, to leapfrog, to move for a better society and involve. So there's also quite a lot of grant money that's being put on reskilling all the coal mining areas in South Africa through the JETP. But there's definitely a potential to leapfrog and retrain those people for the whole South African economy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nadej, for those comments as well. I also want to inform you one of our panelists will take a leave because we've now reaching closer to 1 o'clock. I'm going to turn the platform over to Dan du Toit. If it's all right, Dan, just 2 or 3 comments before you. I've often got this weary thing of Dan, the tall man standing behind me. Then I get a little bit worried about what I'm going to say. I'm teasing. Big brother, indeed. Yeah. You know, as we heard from Nadej as well, and my apologies earlier, I should have introduced myself as well. My name's Rasigan Miraj. I work for Tshwane University of Technology, which is just around the corner. Yeah, you know, the points being raised around prices and costs, these are economics issues itself, but increasingly, as we are hearing, they're actually critical to also the discourse and narrative on science and technology. We cannot exclude it. Yeah, and in many instances, the academic project inside our institutions, in South Africa, even in our region, and on a continental basis, somehow separates out those issues of costs and prices from the work we are doing itself. I know this from inside the institution and the works that we do. We need to redress this so that we can bring it back to the fore, knowing, in fact, with full awareness, what its implications are. But if we are going to do that, we also need to embrace honesty in a real way as well. And the notion of true cost economics becomes very relevant. You all are aware that the current cost basis is not on true costs. Yeah? And the consequence of that is we make mistakes in terms of the deployment of investments because we don't capture true cost itself. The cost of the environment is not an externality because you don't live in a vacuum. But those are the costs we need to bring into the prices, and that changes circumstances. But it also threatens hegemonies. It also threatens monopolies. It threatens oligopolies. It threatens all of those sitting on the top of a pyramid of inequality because of that. We have accumulated emissions debts that have not been repaid to the global south on whose behalf others have developed. And this is something we also need to bear in mind. Yeah? It's not just about Mpumalanga. It's about us collectively in a single world system that has to redress the problem. And here we are talking about the tools to do it with. ICT, the information society, the knowledge economy offers us such tools, and we need to embrace that. But let's not forget our history in terms of how we got here. This is not of our making, and because of it, we need very specific and deliberate mechanisms to get out of it as well. So I thank you very much for your attention here, and Dan du Toit will bring us to closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Razigan, and to the panelists for responding to those most informative questions. Just very briefly from my side, all the questions have been responded to, but if I could just contribute with regard to the general theme of how best to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, a lot has been said about the role of government, rightly so, what government should do at a policy level, what government should do at a funding level, but the point I would want to emphasize is that government cannot do it all alone. Certainly not. It has to be in partnership, and that's why one of the key themes of South Africa's new 10-year plan for science, technology, and innovation is how do we promote those partnerships. We always keep on say that that's not a plan for the government, it's not a plan for a specific department. There's a plan for all of South Africa. Second point is that if you look at South Africa's successes in science, and I think that that's applicable to individual entrepreneurs, Africa, etc., focus on your key comparative advantages and exploit those. That's, for example, why South Africa has invested so much in astronomy, because we have a key comparative advantage. We can host facilities here which cannot be hosted elsewhere. And then the third point is also the long-term vision. Policies may not be perfect, but where they make sense, stick to them and progress towards implementation. So once again, panelists, thank you very much for that. We've now come to the part, which is certainly an important part of these proceedings, to honor the best paper which was delivered during this conference. Identifying that paper was certainly not an easy task, because looking at the exciting program, I'm sure Paul and the jury had a very, very difficult task to do that. So Paul, can I ask you to lead this section?
Akordia. I'd like to compliment the panelists, and particularly Razagan, who did a wonderful job as a moderator. So we're coming to my not my favorite part of the conference. I think my favorite part of the conference is, meeting you all again after 3 years of being apart. And it is wonderful to see so many familiar faces, but also new friends. I'm also delighted that we've had such good representation from the diplomatic community this year, and I hope that will continue, because I think it's very important that science and technology councillors from various embassies are fully engaged in these kind of opportunities, not just to engage with the host country, in this case, the Government of South Africa through the Department of Science and Innovation, but indeed all of the host countries for IST-Africa conferences going forward. This is the 18th conference in this series, and I'm very pleased that this year's runner-up paper goes to immutable livestock tracking and compliance logs using blockchain, authored by Maria Eugenia Lopez of Enchain, United Kingdom. Is Maria here? Excellent, please. And Dan, on behalf of the Department of Science and Technology, will give the prize. Yeah, runner-up. And then this year's best paper is implementing a digital health information system during the COVID-19 pandemic, a stakeholders approach from Kenya, co-authored by Ayub Manya, Peter Awegamjo, Joseph Sitenli, Denver Marigia, Robert Oboko, Raphael Pundo, and Phyllis Wawamba from the Ministry of Health Kenya and the University of Nairobi, Kenya. Do we have one of the speakers here? If not, they're going to have to come back to South Africa to collect their prize. I'm kidding. We'll find a way of getting it to you. I now come to my second favourite part of the event, which is to thank everyone who's helped make this event possible. So we'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the plenary speakers, plenary panelists, the presenters, the session chairs and coordinators, and the delegates for your active participation. And it's been truly energizing to see the level of engagement that has been. There has been truth talking, there has been straight speaking, people have asked the questions they needed to speak, but you've all done it in a very respectful way. Even if you didn't necessarily agree with something that somebody said, you put your point and you tried to explore how you either didn't understand what they were trying to communicate, or maybe where there were points of convergence. And I very much appreciate that spirit, which is core to what IST Africa is all about, which is mutually beneficial collaboration. You've all contributed towards the significant success of IST Africa 2023, and we hope you've taken the opportunity to network and to identify collaborators to continue to follow up with over the coming weeks. We'd like to thank the Government of South Africa through the Department of Science and Innovation for hosting IST Africa 2023. We'd like to thank Dr. Blaise Nzambe, MP, Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Phil Mujara, the Director General, Dan Detroit, our friend, Deputy Director General for International Cooperation and Resources, Vinnie Pillay, who's the Chief Director for International Resources, Toto Machengiso, Director of Global Projects, and the DSI team, which have included Tumi, Elawani, Letta, Cleopatra, Kamutso, Mabeken, Zwali, and Mbato, who have provided fantastic support during both the preparation phase and the running of this very complex event. We'd like to thank and acknowledge the ongoing support of the European Commission and the African Union Commission. We'd like to thank the IEEE technical co-sponsors, the IEEE Society of Social Implications of Technology, the IEEE South Africa Section, and IEEE Africa Council. We'd like to thank DSI for hosting the conference dinner on Wednesday and the Science Diplomacy Capsule for Africa for hosting the very enjoyable networking cocktail last night. And these social events provide an important opportunity to relax and to get to know one another, because it's only by building trust and common understanding that we can actually achieve something together. And I'm glad that you've engaged in that spirit. We'd like to thank the International Programme Committee, who double peer-reviewed papers and provided actionable feedback to authors to assist in improving the quality of papers, and particularly those who chaired and moderated the sessions. They did a lot of homework to make sure that they understood what you were trying to achieve and that you had an opportunity to have a voice by asking you appropriate questions and to stimulate the audience to engage with you as well. We'd like to thank the staff of the CSIR International Convention Centre for the very friendly atmosphere, and as Dan said, they hosted us the first time we were here, and it's gone from strength to strength over that period of time over the last 18 years. They've really helped to make everything run very, very smoothly. So before I say my goodbyes and then hand over to Dan to close down the conference, my third favourite part, which is we pull names out of a hat. And if you're in the room, and if you're the first person that's in the room when we call out the paper, you get to walk away with a little gift. So, Dan. Very much. Senyeki Marabane from TUT South Africa. Excellent. It's always less embarrassing when you don't have a couple of people who walked out early who missed out on the opportunity. So on behalf of Miriam and I, we'd like to wish you a safe trip home and a great rest that you deserve it over the weekend. We'll issue the call for papers for IST-Africa 2024 during July, and we very much look forward to your active participation next year. Slán go fóill, and I hand over to Dan.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'll be extremely brief, but it was important for me to at least say one thing during these closing remarks, which you didn't, and I understand why, mention in your thank yous, and that's to thank you, and to thank you and Miriam for not only your hard work, and I put an emphasis on the word hard work in preparing and in hosting this event, and I'm sure if Miriam is not in the room, I don't see it. It's because she's working somewhere, but those of us who have had the privilege to have been to different IST-Africa events, to have known the partnership over the years, I'm sure you'll all agree it's a family. When people ask me to describe IST-Africa, I said over the years it became a family. And of course, every family needs founding parents. And we are very privileged at IST-Africa, we have yourself, Paul, and Miriam as the founding parents of this unique partnership and unique family. So from behalf of the Government of South Africa, the Department of Science and Innovation, but also your colleagues and friends, thank you very much for entrusting us with this privilege to host IST-Africa. And we certainly do look forward to a few years from now to return here. Just on my behalf, again, I would also like to thank specifically our friends in the diplomatic community, see our friends from the Embassy of China and others here. Thank you for your consistent support. Also to my own team who worked hard and invested a lot. Thank you very much. And then to everyone else who invested their time to be present here. What I can assure you is that from the Department of Science and Innovation, not only during this panel discussion, but throughout the week, we like to be a listening government, an attentive government, And we certainly look forward to take forward in partnership with all of you, whether it's through international partnerships, with partners elsewhere in Africa, further afield, or in support of our own innovation ecosystem, the very important conclusions which came from this conference. So thank you very much all. I wish you safe homeward travel for all those that will be travel, and for everyone else, do enjoy the rest of the afternoon. I believe there's luncheon lunch outside for one last final opportunity to engage in some networking. Thank you very much.